Are we still awaiting somebody, or should we make us? All right then. I will continue with the Chair's announcements. Action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice evacuations planned for this evening, but if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the Town Hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street, whichever is appropriate, and then to the car park behind the Town Hall in St Runwall Street. The Council audio records all its public meetings, and these recordings are published on the Council's website. Toilets are available on this floor as well as on the ground and second floors of the Town Hall. Discreet use of mobile phones and other devices is welcomed, but you are requested to set them to silent and not to use voice or flash camera functions. Speakers are reminded that microphones are to be used at all times, as the recording is taken from the microphone feed. I am Cyril Liddy. I am the ward member for Wivenhoe Quay, and I will chair the meeting this evening. I think it would be appropriate to introduce ourselves, starting with you.
Councillor Joe Hayes from Castle Ward.
Councillor Peter Higgins, Liberal Democrat, Newtown Ward.
Councillor Justin Knight, Old Heath Ward. Councillor Christopher Arnold, Fordham and Stour Ward.
Councillor John Elliott, Tiptree Ward.
Councillor Fiona McLean, Stanway Ward.
Councillor Ben Locker, Conservative, Mile End Ward.
Thank you very much. And in attendance, we have Jonathan, who deals with the procedural matters, and Mrs Hedges, who will advise accordingly. Now, moving on to the agenda. Substitutions for the record.
Councillor Knight substituting for Councillor Hayes.
Thank you. Are there any urgent items? I'm not aware of any that aren't part of the substantive agenda. Declarations of interest. Does anybody want to confess any declarations of interest at all? Jolly good. We have the minutes of the meeting of the 30th of June before us. Councillor Arnold, please.
Chairman, on page 11, my illustrious group leader would appear to have lost a T.
So he has. We will arrange for the minutes to be amended accordingly.
Thank you, Chairman.
But he hasn't lost anything else, mercifully.
No comment, Chairman.
Thank you. I take it that these minutes are agreed for those of us that actually attended the meeting. Yes. Okay, jolly good. I will arrange for those to be signed off. Members of the public, have your say? No, good. The work programme. Right, first actual item on the substantive part of the agenda is the work programme, which Jonathan has already dealt with, and I don't think there are any amendments to it. It is as it was the last time we met. Okay. Now, the first truly substantive item on the agenda is the annual statement of accounts. We're required to accept the auditor's report, note the comments in the covering report, approve letter of representation, and, if required, approve the audited statement of accounts. Steve, would you like to come and address the meeting, please? And for the purposes of the recording, Steve Heath is accompanied by Debbie Hanson and Francesca Palmer, both of Ernst & Young, the external auditors. Over to you.
Okay, well, I'll pass you straight over to Debbie, who will present the auditor's report.
Thank you, Steve. So we're taking this slightly out of order. What we'd like to do is take you through the audit results report, which you have in your pack, which starts on page 21. This is the report that we're required to present to you before we issue our opinion on the financial statements. What I'd like to say by way of introduction is that the audit, again, has gone very well, as in previous years, and we'd like to give our thanks to the finance team for another good quality set of accounts and supporting working papers and a very smooth audit process. We're not in a position, unfortunately, to actually sign the opinion today. We are still just in the process of completing our final close down of the file, which is Francesca's review as the audit manager and then my overall review as the director. We are a good way through that review, but it's not 100% complete, so we're not yet in the position to actually sign off the accounts, but we anticipate being able to do that within the next week, maximum 2 weeks, but I would expect within the next week we'd be able to actually be in a position to sign off, so well in advance of the deadline of the end of September. What I'd like to do is just take you through some of the key messages within the report. In the report, we highlight to you in the executive summary the main areas that we cover in the work, so that's on page 24 of your papers. We issue 3 or 4 main elements of the work. We issue an opinion on the financial statements, and we will be issuing an unqualified audit opinion. We also issue a conclusion on your arrangements to deliver economy, efficiency and effectiveness and the use of resources. And again, we'll be issuing an unqualified value for money conclusion. We then have to do a minimum amount of work on the whole of government accounts return. Because of the size of Colchester, you're what we would call below the threshold. So all we actually have to do is confirm back to the NAO that actually you are below the threshold, and therefore we don't actually do any detailed work on checking your financial statements to the whole of government accounts submission. Once we've done that confirmation and issued our opinions, we can issue the certificate, and we anticipate issuing the certificate at the same time as the opinion and value for money conclusion. So a very positive outcome, I think, from the audit. What I'd like to take you through quite briefly is really just the key risks that we identified on the audit and our findings in relation to the work we did to address those risks. So that starts on page 28 of the report. The first risk we identified was probably quite a national issue, which is business rates appeals. The reason we identified that as a significant risk in Colchester's accounts this year was because there was quite a large increase in your provision. A number of the appeals that you provided for last year were settled after the year end, and some of those settlements were kind of significantly above what you estimated the appeal to come out at, and therefore there was an impact on the provision this year and a greater increase. We therefore highlighted that as a significant risk again this year and have undertaken additional procedures around that. There is one final issue in relation to that we're still just working through with officers, which relates to a National Valuation Tribunal decision, which impacts on purpose-built GP surgeries. That valuation tribunal found against the valuation office from an appeal on an individual GP surgery, and as a result there was a very significant reduction in the rateable value of the purpose-built GP surgery, around 60%. We're therefore just working through with officers at the moment to ensure that the calculation that your management experts have helped with in terms of calculating that provision have taken that judgment into account appropriately, and that therefore we're satisfied that your provision is materially accurate and prepared on a reasonable basis. We expect to conclude that within the next day or so, and we, based on where we are at the moment, we don't expect that to result in any changes to the figures in your accounts, but we are just working through to make sure we're satisfied on that at the moment. That was some fairly late guidance that was only issued in August, which is why it's something that we're only considering at the moment. The next risk we identified is management override, which we identify in all of our audits. The processes we undertake to address that risk is we look at journals, we look at any unusual transactions, any estimates, so anywhere where there's a greater degree of manual intervention in production of the figures for the financial statements, and therefore there could potentially be manipulation in the accounts. All of those procedures have been completed and we didn't find any issues of concern. The next area that we identified was some changes in the code in relation to some of the accounting standards relating to sort of groups, joint operations, joint arrangements, etc. What that meant is that the council revisited its assessment of its arrangements with Colchester Borough Homes and Colchester Community Stadium, confirmed that the treatment that you'd applied in previous years continued to apply, and we reviewed those judgments and were content that we agreed with those conclusions. So good outcome on all of the risks we identified, no real issues arising from any of those. If I can hand over Francesca now to take you through page 31, which just highlights where we were at the time we drafted this report, and she'll update you on where we are today.
This part of the report was drafted as of the 19th of August, so about 3 weeks ago. As of now, we have now completed testing of the financial instruments, capital expenditure and financing disclosures, property, plant and equipment, housing benefit transactions testing, related party transactions, finalisation of work on the HRA, and we've received the remaining investment confirmations today. This means we've only got outstanding finalisation of testing on trade payables and receivables, testing of grant income, and then the receipt of a signed letter of representation and finalisation of WMI review, which we were talking about. We haven't found any uncorrected misstatements in the draft financial statements. And during the course of our audit, the management have identified a number of amendments that they needed to make to the accounts regarding business rates. Virgin Media appeal was made, that came in, it was made in March, so it came into this year. However, the information didn't come through from the valuation office, so we adjusted for that in the year. And they've been corrected during the course of the audit, and further details in Appendix A to this report. We're also required to report to you any other significant findings we have from our audit work, and we haven't got any of those that we wish to report.
So in relation to the financial statements, we sorry, thank you. Is appended to this report, you have a draft letter of representation, which again we always ask for that to be approved by this audit committee and then to be signed by the chair on the date that we plan to issue our audit opinion. We are only asking for the standard representations. There are no additional representations that we're asking for in relation to Colchester's accounts. So all of those are the ones we ask all of our clients to provide representation on. I was going to move on to talk about our value for money conclusion. Happy to take any questions on the accounts, or I'll wait till the end of the presentation.
No questions?
I will move on to the value for money conclusion then. As I've just outlined, the value for money conclusion, which we discuss on page 36 of the report, there's two main elements to the conclusion that we issue. The first of those looks at your arrangements to ensure financial resilience, and the second looks at the Council's arrangements to ensure economy, efficiency and effectiveness in the use of resources. We had no issues that we identified in relation to the second of those criteria. We consider the sort of service review programme that the Council has in place, risk management arrangements, performance management arrangements, etc. as part of consideration of that criteria. We did identify a significant risk in relation to the first of the criteria, however, which is arrangements for securing financial resilience. This is a common picture across many of our clients where we didn't identify this at planning stage, but subsequently through the year we received further guidance in relation to this criteria, and as a result we revisited our risk assessments. That was very much reflecting the greater pressures that all councils are under in terms of uncertainty in future funding streams and reductions in those funding streams against an environment of, in a number of areas, increasing demand for services. So as a result of that, we looked more critically at the budget gaps that councils had in their medium-term financial plans, as well as the assumptions that were made about funding streams. The reason we identified a risk for Colchester was not in relation to the budget gap, I would stress, which is actually quite a positive position. It's a relatively low budget gap compared to your gross expenditure, and the council's got a very strong track record of delivering savings and actually delivering a positive budget outcome, so underspends or very close to budgets. The risk that we identified was very specific. It was in relation to the level of new homes bonus that the council receives, which is quite significant because of the development in the borough. And the amount of that is included in the base budget to fund ongoing revenue spend on services. The council is very, very aware of this risk, and that's really clear from all of the documents that were provided to us and the documents that are in the public domain, and is also taking active steps to reduce that level of reliance by using large elements of the new homes bonus for one-off items of spend, therefore not building it into your base budget assumptions. However, there is still a fairly significant amount within the council's base budget, and there is therefore a risk that if that tap of funding was turned off by government in the future or redistributed in some way, because I think a lot of councils that are in a similar position to Colchester and receive large amounts of new homes bonus recognise the fact that it's unlikely that government would completely remove that, but they may choose to distribute funds in a different way, which meant that you got less funding and a different council got more funding through a different mechanism. So it presents a risk. That's why we undertook further detailed work with officers. We were satisfied that officers are responding to that risk appropriately, that you have good levels of reserves and balances, which would in effect buy you some time to bring in additional plans for service delivery, etc., and savings if that funding was reduced. So on that basis, we've concluded that the Council does have adequate arrangements and will be issuing an unqualified value for money conclusion, but we thought it was appropriate to report that particular risk to this committee, and as I said, officers are very clearly aware of it and are doing their best to minimise your exposure to that risk, but there is still a residual risk there. I wasn't proposing to say very much more. I'm sure members will ask a question about the audit fees. We have got a section in the page on independence and audit fees where we refer to a change in our approach to gaining assurance over the Colchester Borough homes transactions which are included in the Colchester group accounts. The reason for that is there was a change in our audit approach which meant that to rely on the auditor of Colchester Borough homes we would have had to issue what we call group instructions and undertake some sample review of the auditor's work on Colchester Borough homes. We determined that actually the more efficient approach would be to do direct testing ourselves on those items that are material to your group accounts, and that's the approach we went down. However, there was still additional work on that over and above previous years where we have just relied on the audit report that has been provided by the auditor of Colchester Borough homes. I'm very happy to take any questions or comments on anything in the report.
Does anybody have any questions of Debbie? Do we have a figure for the additional cost?
We don't yet. We will
Okay.
discuss that with the finance team, and once we've concluded the audit, we'll look at the outturn. Sorry, I'm terrible at remembering microphones. We will look at the outturn on the audit. We will obviously try and minimise that as much as we possibly can, but we'll come back and discuss and agree with officers and then report back to this committee.
Thank you. Councillor Arnold, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Debbie, welcome again. Glad you made it this year. Several times you've referred to the audit not yet being completed, and you've just referred to it again. This isn't a question about the content of the audit, it's a question about the timing of this meeting. Because we actually got the officers got the account out nearly a month earlier this year. Have we got this meeting in the wrong place? Or is there something peculiar about this year which means that you haven't finished the work yet?
That's probably quite a difficult one to answer because obviously, as members will be aware, there will be an earlier both deadline for production of your accounts and for the audit opinions to be issued from 2017-18, with you having to produce the accounts by the end of May and us having to audit by the end of July. So we are generally trying to bring forward the dates actually so that we can get I guess some trial runs in on producing accounts earlier from your perspective and on us completing the audit earlier. However, having said that, we have scheduled audits in at different times this year because the deadline is still the end of September and therefore we are still planning some of our work to be concluded to that point. I think we always thought that this was quite an early committee, being early September, and there is also vacation of both our own audit teams and finance staff within all of our clients that we have to deal with over the July and August audit period, which is quite difficult to manage at the moment. So I think ideally we would very much have liked to have been 100% complete, and we did think that was potentially possible, but it hasn't quite been. It's only been, as I said, by probably a relatively few number of days. So I think we were aiming to be ambitious and maybe we were slightly too ambitious.
Thank you. Chairman, we have the moving target coming up anyway, which I suppose makes things even more difficult. As I do wonder, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything here, but there may be a temptation to crank the handle in sort of committee services and turn one year into the next and try and get the meetings in the same place. Presumably then we'd be looking at a much earlier meeting to approve the account, wouldn't we, in future years? I just wanted to make sure that that there's actually some liaison going on between yourselves and committee services at the point that the meeting is fixed, which was probably last December, so that we actually allow you enough time to do the job. Because I'm sure you've said it yourself. You would rather be sitting in front of us having completed the audit. I would rather be sitting in front of you, hearing the report on the completed audit, and not being told that you're going to be sorting things out with officers after we've gone. So, is there actually it's almost a question for Jonathan, but is there actually liaison in place to make sure that the meeting does come in the right place for your timetable?
I can confirm that we did request that the meeting be brought forward and in anticipation of earlier closure, because we were anticipating to close the draft accounts a month early, which we did, and so it was, as Debbie said, it was ambitious. At this point in time, the plan for next year is for the audit to start in June. This year it began in mid-July. Next year, at this point in time, the plan is for the audit to start mid-June. But of course, we'll regularly liaise with the auditors and community services over the timing of the meetings to make sure that they're appropriate and achievable.
That's very good to hear, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. As regarding this year's accounts, since they're incomplete for the reasons you've just stated, are committee members happy to have the final copy circulated by email for comments, and then if the committee agrees, I can sign them off to that effect?
Do we know that the regulations permit that?
I believe they do.
It's okay for one person to make that decision. I'm not suggesting anything personally about you. I'm just making sure that it's done properly.
Could I ask Debbie, please, to remind us again which are the outstanding items on page 31?
I think if I let Francesca go through the outstanding items, but I think just to clarify, we do not expect there to be any changes to the figures within the financial statements now. So the accounts that you have in front of you today are the accounts that we expect to sign off on. As I said, we just need to complete some of our procedures. What we would also do to you is send you an updated audit results report with basically the list of outstanding issues removed. If there were any significant issues that emerged in the next week, what we would do is ask this committee to delegate approval for us to discuss those issues with the chair, but we do not anticipate any on the basis of the remaining work that we've got to complete. But I'll let Francesca just remind you of those items.
No, the items we still got to complete are finalisation of testing of trade payables and receivables. So we're looking at debtors and creditors there, and that's mainly reviewing. Testing of grant income, we're waiting for one item of supporting documentation. And then receipt of the signed letter of representation, which obviously can't happen until the accounts are finally approved, and completion of Debbie and my manager and director review.
I think just to clarify that I have completed all my review with the exception of the direct testing of Colchester Borough homes, so there's no issues that I expect to arise from my review in relation to those areas.
Councillor Arnold, please.
Chairman, provided that there are no changes, which is where Debbie started, I'd be happy to move that we do accept the account, provided that there are no changes in our absence. If there are changes, then I feel an urge to suggest that we resort to the old-fashioned technique of chairman and group spokes to be got together quickly and have a look at them, please, rather than just chairman, because that's the way it's traditionally been done, I think, in these circumstances.
Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Locker. Have we dealt with this? I think we've dealt with this item now. Thank you very much for all your hard work.
Could I just ask it to be minuted that the committee is happy with the letter of representation and that you will sign that on behalf of the audit committee?
If we take the vote, Chairman, that could also be...
Indeed. Okay, are we all in favour then?
Yes, sir.
We'll make that unanimous then. Thank you. Thank you very much for all your hard work, all of you. Right. The next item on the agenda is Colchester Borough Homes Annual Report and Governance Statement. Michael, please. Please, if you'd like to. Well, actually, just before we do, sorry. For this particular, we are due to consider and comment on the governance assurance statement of Colchester Borough Homes, and also that we accept the assurance provided by Colchester Borough Homes regarding its governance arrangements for the year 2014-15. Michael, please.
Can I start, Chairman, if that's all right?
By all means.
Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Traditionally, I seem to have done that. First of all, really, it's very few words, really. Just first of all, to introduce Michael, I suppose, to everybody. He's our new Director of Resources. I think he's been in post 3 months. And time has flown, I gather. One thing to point out, I think he's a full-time appointment. We have had part-time Director of Resources up until then. So I think this does prove quite a good sound move on our part, and it does enable us to get much more done, I think, obviously, which is very good. And our aspirations for the future, obviously, we do need that full-time appointment, and I think that is proving a very valuable thing to have done. A couple of points from the committee report, if I may, I'd just like to highlight. Paragraph 4 lists some key information from our internal auditors report. As you will see, we do use Mazars, who are also CBC's internal auditors, which I think is a practical and helpful arrangement for everybody. I might add that in their last report to my F&A committee, Mazars did comment that there are currently no recommendations that remain outstanding beyond the agreed implementation date. Appendix 1 is our own annual governance statement, that is really what the main part of the meeting is about, I guess, which clearly demonstrates, in my view, the excellent business management processes that we have adopted as a clear statement of our position. There are just a couple of items that we've carried forward in our action plan for the year in the governance statement. And finally, I think it's useful also to helpful to outline the composition of our audit committee to members. We've got 2 council representatives on that, one from the tenant and leaseholders constituency, and 2 of our independents are also on the committee. One of these is my vice chair, and he is professionally involved in risk management, governance and internal controls in the city financial company. And the other independent is a former head of resources in several London boroughs, and she currently is a member of 2 national audit committees. So we have very good experience from our independent auditors. And they both do, I think Michael will probably agree with this, prove very challenging to the organisation. So that's my introduction briefly, and if Michael perhaps would like to continue.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to reiterate everything Councillor Chapman has just said. In my short time at CBH, I've seen particularly strong controls of an effective internal audit function that works very well with our Finance and Audit Committee. I look forward to the challenge that comes ahead to make sure that we maintain the standards we have set for ourselves in the last year. As the report demonstrates, we've got no limited assurances on any of the audits we have done, particularly focused on some of the key audit issues or key high-risk areas, and I'll be challenging internal audit to make sure that stays as it is going forwards as well.
Thank you, Michael. Do committee members have any questions to ask, either of Councillor Chapman or Michael? I think it all seems fairly straightforward. And thank you very much for your hard work. And
Chair.
Thank you.
Got off very lightly this year.
Chairman, could I move that the committee accepts the assurance provided by Colchester Borough Homes regarding its governance arrangements?
Indeed. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Do you want to put it to the vote?
Yep.
Unanimously.
I think there's something wrong, Chairman, with a decision being recorded that hasn't actually been taken.
Thank you. Right. The next item on the agenda is polling districts and polling places review. This one ordinarily would have been given by Sarah Cheek, but in fact has been given by Andrew Weavers. We are required to note the requirement to carry out a review of all polling districts and polling places and the arrangements to reflect the new borough ward boundaries following the electoral review. Also to agree the proposals contained at 5.1 and 5.3, 5.1 to 5.3 of this report. That is to say that the draft schedule of polling districts and polling places be published and consulted upon in accordance with the timetable above, and that the electoral service manager undertakes visits to the polling districts and polling places where comments are received and issues ascertained. That comments from councillors and interested parties be collated by the electoral services manager, who will then report back to this committee at its meeting on the 24th of November this year. Andrew, please.
Thank you for that introduction, Chairman. If I could just give you just a bit of background. I know you have touched on this, but I think I just need to just clarify a couple of points. As a consequence of the electoral review, we are required to review our polling districts and polling places in the borough. So that's why we're doing it now. Just as a bit of background, the necessary statutory instrument that is going to introduce the changes to the wards in the borough is currently on its journey through Parliament. It has to be in Parliament for 40 sitting days. It's got 30 sitting days to left before it comes out the other end. So it should come out sometime, hopefully at the end of October. This is not a review of the new boundaries or the new wards. This is a review, say, of the polling districts and of the polling places. We currently have 86 polling districts in the borough. And what we need to do is to see if they are still fit for purpose, looking at the new boundaries and the new wards. What you've got in your package, you've got a draft schedule of polling districts and places, which we've produced on the new ward boundaries. And broadly, what's happened is the existing polling districts have been moved intact from the existing ward structure and placed into the new ward structures, except for 7 areas which are highlighted on a plan. And I'm just going to highlight one area for you to give an example. Areas 1 to 7, say, on the plan show where the polling districts have actually been split. So most of them are all intact, but 6, actually 6 is not 7, 6 have been split. And those streets that are affected are in the schedule. So really what we're looking at, are the polling districts right? Are the polling places fit for purpose moving forward? So I'm just going to show you, just very briefly, one example of this. So if you look at, on your agenda, if you look at the one for Mile End, which is on page 88 of your agenda, I've put it up on the screen for you. I say apologies for the quality of the print in your papers. There you can see there the new Mile End ward. And you can see, so I'm going to have to stand up here. If you look at the polling district AW, if you look here, this bit here, that chunk there has moved. Currently it's part of AW, and that is moving into the new High Woods ward into polling district AP. Now, if you bear with me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this down, and by magic, there it is. This is area 1 on the plan, and that is that area there highlighted. So all of those roads there within that area 1, which are listed in the proposed changes column in your report here, are moving out of the existing Mile End ward and into the new High Woods ward, and out of polling district AW into polling district AP in the new High Woods ward. So there's just an example of those changes and what they mean. In the schedule, you will see clearly laid out are all the streets that are moving in these 6 areas. And so everybody's aware. Can I take you to paragraph 4.3 of the report, which sets out the timetable? As the chairman has said, we have to consult. We have to go through a consultative process on the review. And this is what you're being asked to agree. You're being asked to agree the commencement of the consultative process. So the timetable is that it comes here tonight, and we will, and if you agree this, we will commence the review on Monday, the 14th of September, and that consultation will run for 30 days, and it will end on the 20th of October. We will then analyse all of the responses that we get, and you will get a report back with comments on all of the responses back that we have received, and we'll bring it back to your meeting on the 24th of November, where you will be asked to agree the final proposals, which will be then submitted on to full council for ratification at its meeting on the 10th of December 2015. The timetable is very tight. We do not have any leeway, I'm afraid, to change this. And what this is going to mean is that the new electoral register will now be published on the 1st of February 2016. And you'll say to me, why that date? And that date is because we have now had a request for the Dedham and Langham by-election to be called. We have received 2 requests from members of the public. We are currently trying to arrange the date when that by-election is going to be held. But because we've got a by-election now, that puts back the publication of the new electoral register to that date, the 1st of February 2016. So, Chairman, as you've said, the proposals that I put forward in the report are set out there at paragraphs 5.1 to 5.3. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Right, do committee members have any questions? Councillor Higgins, please.
Yes, one is just making the report complete. Not surprisingly, I looked at Newtown and Christchurch Ward on page 92, and there the number of electors in each polling district is absent, as is the polling station in the first case and the polling place. So those gaps need to be filled in, do they not?
Chairman, are you talking about polling district AX there?
AZ.
You've got AZ, you've got Canterbury Road below, but above it...
AX has got one, yes, but AZ hasn't.
AZ hasn't. No, you're all right. You're absolutely correct. That one has fallen out. Okay, thank you for spotting that.
So that needs to be filled in. Just a general comment. I know this is a bit early, but can somebody give me any reason why in Stanway there is one polling station with over 6,500 electors, and in Mersey there's another one with 203? I mean, as a rule of thumb, you'd think there'd be basically one polling station for each polling district, but it's just nothing like that. And this is a chance to put things, to rectify that and make things a little bit more uniform, is it not?
Chairman, can I just clarify there, with the Stanway polling place, there are more than one polling station in the same building.
To the general public. Yeah, to the general public, that's just a nice point of no
but that's how
consequence.
That's how it is dealt with at the moment.
Yeah, but as a matter of convenience about how far you have to go to your polling station, in Stanway, everybody has to come to the same building, whereas in Mersey and other places, there are very tiny polling stations where nobody goes. Yeah. And it's really strange.
Yeah, Chairman could say, presumably that's something that you'd like to make, a comment you'd like to make as part of the consultation.
Yes, getting in early, as it were. Thank you.
Do we have any further questions at all on the president? Councillor Hayes, please.
Yes, I'm intrigued about what the relationship is between the town council and civil parish council boundaries and the polling districts, or is there no relation?
Please, Andrew.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, very valid point. In the rural areas, perhaps if I can show you, if I refer you to page 105, which is actually Rural North, the new Rural North. I can quickly get there. I can show you probably better on the screen than, unfortunately, on the agenda. There we go. We'll get there in a minute. There we are. The new Rural North. If I zoom in, you will see Rural North is made up of polling districts from EA to EL. All of those are based on the parish boundaries. So if we start up at EA, you can see Dedham, Langham, and then all the way along there. So the polling districts in the rural areas are predicated on the existing parish boundaries, and we would not seek to change those.
Would you like to ask a supplementary, please?
Presumably each polling station has to be staffed.
Yes.
And so rural north becomes rather an expensive ward. And I was just curious to know, whether it's actually required that the civil parish boundaries be used, or whether it's just a sort of convention.
Please.
It's a legal requirement that they're used.
Chairman, as somebody who's represented sort of 2 parishes in that area for over 20 years and 5 parishes in that area for 5 years, for 13 years, it does seem to me appropriate to say that some of those areas are actually larger than the urban wards by virtue of the amount of empty countryside there is in between. And 1 polling station per ward, per ward, probably doesn't seem unreasonable to the people who live there. I don't know if it's particularly expensive if you put a polling clerk and somebody else into a polling station in, say, the Royal Grammar School. Does that cost more than putting a polling clerk and somebody else into Great Hawksley? I suspect that it doesn't. It's 2 people for a day in a polling district. I can't see where the extra cost would come from. Anyway, that's just sort of my view, as somebody who's sort of had experience over 20 years of it.
Thank you, Councillor Arnold.
Just very quickly, the costs, the staffing costs are prescribed by law, so it doesn't matter where they are.
Are there any further questions? Yes. Sorry. All right, so we need to take a decision. Let me just... Yeah. To Councillor Arnold, please.
Chairman, I noticed that once again we don't have the press with us tonight, and it's obviously and there is no mention in 8. There's on the public website, available for public inspection, which presumably means we're going to have them at various places out there. There is no mention of, or have I got it? I'm just now looking at the previous paragraph. We do not appear to be making a point of engaging with local media to put this out. We probably are. Mr. Weavers is nodding, but I would like to know that we are, because it doesn't say so in the report, and they're not listening to us tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Arnold.
Chairman, apologies. I should have touched on the consultation element of it. What we have done, there will be obviously a press release about this, the start of the consultation. There will be the opportunity for people to make representations electronically through the website. A portal will go live where people will be able to make their comments whether they think that the polling districts and or polling places are appropriate. So, yes, Chairman. And as opposed to all the statutory consultees that we have to engage with that are set out at paragraph 7 of the report.
Thank you.
I'm conscious that I think the local paper has got a circulation of about 18,000 copies, which is not and doesn't actually go to some parts of the rural north. It's not on sale in all of that area. Is there anything else that can be done? Are we particularly going to engage with radio stations and things like that to make sure that they are putting out the news as well?
Please.
Chairman, I will raise it with the comms team and see what strategy they suggest.
Do we have any further questions of Mr. Weavers? In that case, then, we are required to note the requirement to carry out the review of the polling districts and to agree the proposals contained in paragraph 5.1 to 5.3 of the report. May I have a proposer, please? Right. Thank you, Councillor Knight. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Elliott. Show of hands, please. All in favour? Thanks. Pass unanimously. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. This is the review of risk management. Let me just get that. For the current year, and it will be Hayley McGrath who will advise us on it. We are, I should say, required or requested to consider and note the risk management work undertaken during the current year, consider and comment on the current strategic risk register, consider and comment on the proposed risk management strategy for the year 2015-16, and endorse the submission of this report to the Cabinet. So, Hayley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Those of you that were here last year will know that this is the annual report. It's slightly later this year because of the timings of the committee meetings. But nonetheless, it's the summary that we send up to, as the Chair said, to Cabinet, and then goes on to full Council because it affects our policy framework. So it has to have formal adoption to be able to do that. I'm going to take it in a slightly different order to the report. So I'll start with the work undertaken during 2014-15. We had a reorganisation within Corporate and Financial Management Services in June 2014 as a fundamental service review. And that brought together a lot of the risk and governance work issues and streams into one team, and the corporate governance team was formed. So that consists of health and safety, risk management, insurance, business continuity, democratic services. So we actually tightened up our controls for governance, including the risk management, which actually gives us a much more comprehensive approach to preventing and mitigating risks. The main focus during the year has been to review and manage physical risks, from vehicle accidents to violence and aggression incidents. One of the issues that we highlighted on our annual governance statement this year, you may recall, is health and safety issues, and some of those related to violence and aggression incidents, especially for some of our front-facing officers, namely the parking partnership, and the issues they face on a daily basis. So we've been working with them to look about how we manage those incidents and reduce the number of issues that they are having. We've also been working to embed risk management within the procurement processes. I've been working with the procurement team to ensure that we support the development of a commercial approach. So obviously, as you're aware, the Council is changing the way that it operates, and we want to go into a more commercial environment, but we're making sure that the risk management framework supports that and is not a hindrance to actually moving into that sector. There was no fundamental changes to the processes used to identify and control risk, and the annual audit of risk management was carried out in January 2015, and this highlighted one level 2 recommendation. So that's been taken on board, and hopefully this year's audit will be an improvement on that one. So if I can just hop to the strategy for 2015-16 before I come back to the register. We are required to review the strategy every year to make sure it's still fit for purpose. I've been through it. I've discussed it with senior management. There were no fundamental changes to make to it. We feel that it still provides us with an adequate framework which has been endorsed by our external auditors as an appropriate way of managing our risks. Therefore, a revised strategy has been produced for you at Appendix 3. So the main part, I suppose, is the strategic risk register. That has had a fundamental review. I've had individual meetings with all of our senior management, from the Chief Exec, the Chief Operating Officer, the Executive Director, the Strategic Director and the Heads of Service, to talk about risks and concerns that they have facing the organisation. And then as a group, as Performance Management Board, those risks were then reviewed and discussed, and wanted to make sure that the risks that we'd highlighted for you were still the appropriate ones, that things had or hadn't changed, whether there was new items to be added or whether any of the scores should be changed. In section 6 on page 123, I have highlighted for you some of the changes to the register. At 6.3, we've identified that risk 1E relating to the impact of the UCC FSR could be removed, as actually the implementation of the FSR actions has been completed and they've been embedded. So actually those risks have changed, so that risk itself can be removed by implementation. It was also recognised that Section 3 of the register, which relates to people, needed to be reviewed to reflect the move to a more commercial environment. So this included removing the risks 3B, which is the resources required for training and development, and 3C, visible and effective leadership, as actually those risks have actually been resolved. So work has been undertaken within the organisation to ensure that those risks aren't key to the organisation any longer. A new risk, 2C, impact of the welfare reform, has been added to reflect the challenges to the resources in responding to rising customer demand. And we've also had some changes on scores on the register, which are highlighted on the register for you, so you can see the old score and the current one. What I would like to highlight is score 6C, which was increased to reflect the issue that you heard about from the external auditors earlier about the financial resilience of the organisation. So it was a demonstration that actually senior management took that very, very seriously and have actually highlighted that, so have increased the risk quite significantly. And I'm open to any questions, Chair.
Do we have any questions? Does the committee have any questions? I do have one. Presumably the score at 6C of 20 is in the light of what we were told a few minutes ago, earlier on this meeting.
It's in light of the comments that have been made by the external auditor, but it had already been recognised by senior management that those issues were out there and that we needed to actually manage them.
Thank you. Are we satisfied as a committee with the scorings? First of all, with the list of risks, is it sufficiently comprehensive? And secondly, are we satisfied with the scorings? Are there any observations that anybody would like to make? Councillor Locker, please.
This is very much a new boy question, I think. But when I read it and looked at the scorings, I could get an indication that obviously there's a lot of trainings, a lot of working together to create these scores, but I don't get any real sense of the methodology behind it. Could you explain a little more?
There is a good deal of debate that goes on with regards to the scores. We actually score on the basis of 1 to 5 at Colchester, and at the back of the register there is a table to actually highlight what 1 to 5 means in terms of impact and probability. Now, there's very strong debate, I have to say, sometimes at Performance Management Board about the risks, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And the way that we gather those risks together is through various means. So from my position as the Corporate Governance Manager, I will have access to information from a risk point of view, from an insurance point of view, so I know about physical issues. I will know a lot about the governance issues that are going on from part of my governance work that I do. I get involved with all of the services, and as I say, I have at least one conversation every year for about an hour or so with each senior officer, kind of interrogating them about their risks and their concerns. And I bring all of that together to the senior management team. It's their risk register, so I will recommend issues to them. I will start debates with them, and I'm sure Mrs. Hedges will agree sometimes I do get shot down in flames because I'll raise an issue and they think that's not appropriate, or it's not a risk that really is a concern at that point in time, or other risks that I raise will then start a debate amongst the senior management. So it really is a collaborative approach, highlighting the issues that we know about from a strategic point of view.
Councillor Locker, does that answer your question?
It does. I have another question, but I'll wait my turn.
All right. Councillor Hayes, please.
Yes, I was interested in the references to moving to a more commercial environment, and in 5.3, working to ensure the risk processes support the development of a commercial approach. And I wonder whether you could expand on that a little, how the commercial approach has actually been incorporated.
Of course, it's looking at certain ways of working, and it's trying to find an approach that provides assurance to the organisation that the risks are mitigated, but allows that bit of creativity at the same time and an expansion in a different way of working. So the risk areas that I'm looking at, I work with the procurement team to look at potential tenders that are going out, to look at risk areas that are being highlighted in the tenders, to highlight any areas that haven't been covered. So if in a contract, for example, there isn't a reference to responsibility for liabilities and transfer of those liabilities as part of the contract arrangement, we will look at those. We'll also set limits for minimum sums insured from contractors and suppliers. And it's about making sure, however, those processes don't restrict our ability as an organisation to develop into that more commercial environment, but protect us as a public sector organisation at the same time.
Thank you, Hayley. Councillor Locker, please. And Councillor Arnold.
Yes, there's one thing that I would like to ask about. Does this in any way take into account potential risks or opportunities that would arise from a change of administration next year? Now, I'm not a soothsayer. I don't know what the results of the next local elections will be, but our group leader on the Conservative group has said many times on the record that if we were to become the majority group, then we may well move towards a commissioning council model. Is that in any way reflected in here?
I think the theme runs through all of our risks. We don't highlight it as an individual risk itself, but there's always those conversations and debates at Performance Management Board about potential changes in the administration. And that's not just particular to this year, it's at any point in time. So we work on the basis we have an administration at the moment and there are risks associated with that, but we are always conscious that that could change. And that is one of those risks that I don't think will ever go away, but it's one of those ones that we don't highlight because it's always there, but we bear that in mind with the risks that we do put on the register.
Mrs. Hedges.
If I can just supplement Hayley's answer, if you look at 4A, then if you read between the lines, you could interpret that as addressing your point, Councillor Locker, I think, which it says to continually assess future challenges to ensure council is fit for future purpose. It's page 129. Risk 4A, which you could interpret in a number of ways, but I think would pick up that risk. And clearly officers are aware of the risks and opportunities that an all-out election presents.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Locker?
Not quite, but I see what you're saying.
Thank you very much. Councillor Arnold, please.
Yeah, the matrix on page 135 has got two areas identified as being in probability of occurrence very high and severity of impact high. Also has one probability of occurrence high, impact high, which ought to be a worrying matter. And when I look them up, 4D, the one that's very high, one of the two that's very high and high, is potential impact of future central government decisions to reduce public funding, including that of our partners. I could understand why that should be a high severity of impact, but what do the officers think they know that it's appropriate to judge that as being a very high probability of occurrence? Because that is a very bold statement to make, that central government is going to do something which is going to, there is a high probability that central government is going to do something which is going to have that sort of impact on the organisation. The other one that's already been talked about is 6C, and that has the same very high probability of occurrence. I'm challenging you to justify why that's a very high probability of occurrence.
I think it's a reflection of the external auditor's comments partly earlier about the use of resources that we have and how we allocate those resources. And I think it's that recognition that we need to be perhaps a little bit more forward thinking about how we do that. I can say that 4D relates very much to 6C. Although it's on the horizon scanning, it's about our financial resources going forward and how they're managed. And we know that those financial resources will be reducing over the next few years. There's a definite, they're not going to increase, they are going to get less. So we have to be a little bit more aware of that and make sure that we have processes in place to actually mitigate against it.
Does that answer your question?
I fear it doesn't. It's actually why the organisation apparently believes that there is a very high risk of government pulling the rug from underneath this authority and presumably many other authorities, that's 4D, and from under our partners, to the extent that it has a severe impact on this organisation.
They said they would.
Councillor Higgins, I wasn't being glib. I'm trying to make a serious point here. I want to know if this has been correctly identified as being, in the words of the Matrix, a very high probability that this will occur. I accept the high severity of impact, were it to happen. It's just I want to know the basis on which this expectation exists.
Right. Mrs. Hedges may be in a position to answer that.
I think there are a number of factors that we've taken into account, Councillor Arnold. We have the November review coming up, spending review, which we are, as the auditors have highlighted, we expect there to be some changes to new homes bonus. And we know that just less than 50% of the new homes bonus is now in our base budget, and it's a bit ironic that we've done very well from new homes bonus, and therefore the decision has been made that some of that is in our base budget. So we expect there to be some changes through messages that we've heard from government. We've had the changes in local government finance around business rates and how that works. Again, you heard the external auditors highlight the appeals issues which are coming through the system. Some very large organisations that are making appeals that will have a financial impact on us. I think they actually mentioned one of the organisations that we're waiting for the results of at the moment in Virgin Media. There are some other indications. So, for example, the changes around welfare reform, the changes in rent in particular, and the impact that that will have on HRA, which I know Colchester Borough Homes are working through at the moment, but will very significantly change the amount of headroom we have in HRA and our ability to deliver some of the things that we expected to be able to deliver through the HRA. So I think there are some things that have already emerged that suggest to us that there are going to be other very significant changes. And, you know, Adrian is very well connected. He attends a lot of LGA conferences. He's also connected in the district network and is hearing and is getting messages from senior civil servants about what November might look like as well. So I think it is based on a level of intelligence that we receive, both publicly and sometimes more privately.
Councillor Arnold, does that assist you?
It persuades me that an argument has been made. I am uncomfortable with it being in the report at that level, that a decision by central government that's going to have a high level of impact on the organisation is highly likely to happen. I'm not hearing the sort of justification I would expect for that. I can understand other things in the organisation, you know, but this is pulling out two which relate to central government and seems to me making almost a political statement about it, that we expect, you know, we expect central government to make decisions which are going to be that damaging to the organisation.
Mrs. Hedges, please.
I beg that it's not a political point. I think you know me better than to try and make political points. It is Yes, good. Okay. I mean, I can give you other examples, which again, you may view as verging on political, but actually we are seeing the impact of. So there are other decisions that are being made around funding of other public sector organisations. We're being consulted on changes to fire service, to police, which again have impact on our resources. So some changes, for example, recently about how the police deal with antisocial behaviour incidents and what they will now consider attending and what they won't. And you know, we have a dilemma about where we pick up and where we don't. So again, there are additional knock-on effects of other public spending, public organisations and their spending and their finances that are available and how we respond. So it's part of quite a big package of things that we are seeing going on and the impact on our resources.
Councillor Arnold, please.
Chairman, I shall watch over the next few months as the statement is made and the autumn statement is made, and that this council's budget comes together perhaps more closely than I have in recent years, just to see whether this high risk actually comes apart. I can accept there are changes that have happened, and that's a basis on which you might say that more changes could happen. I remain uncomfortable, but we are asked to consider and comment. I've commented. The Mayor will be grateful to you, Chairman.
I know.
I'm content to leave it there to now and watch. I'm certainly not going to get into a discussion about what may or may not be going to happen in the next few months, when we could actually sit and wait and comment on this on the budget speech in February.
Mrs Hedges, then Councillor Hayes.
If I may just make one further small point, hopefully I've tried to clarify and justify why it's so high up. I mean, it's high on the, it's very high, we consider it to be those items to be high risk, and because they're high risk, it means that they get a substantial amount of attention. One of those risks actually has been in that box for some time, because we have seen, a significant amount of change coming through from central government over the last few years, and have responded to that. And because we identify it as high risk, we make sure that we are taking appropriate actions to make sure that the impact is as small as it possibly can be.
Hayes, please.
Yes, could I ask Mrs Hedges whether the senior officers have had the pleasure, as I have, of reading the very detailed and comprehensive March 2015 budget documents, the parts which related to future plans from the general election until 2018 were not agreed by the coalition, but they were the statement of intention of the Conservative part of the government, which is now the new government, and showed an intention to massively reduce the public sector. And would she not agree that it seems rather difficult to see how that can be achieved without a very high risk of it impacting on this council, for which reason I for my own part, think it is rightly put as a very high risk.
I think that is possibly putting Mrs Hedges in a slightly difficult position.
I would like to give an answer, but probably not a direct answer. I think that we have already built into the budget an expectation of grant reduction, which Sean Plummer, takes a judgment on. So we are aware of, that there are going to be further reductions in government grant. But we have, as I mentioned earlier, we've done very well out of New Homes Bonus. We've actually done very well out of the change in the way that business rates are divided, so that we retain a percentage of the growth in business rates. So actually, we've seen some growth in areas that we get from that some people would say replace some of the reduction in grants. So we do try to anticipate. So there is already a percentage reduction built in to the medium-term financial strategy, but I think that's probably as far as I can go.
Thank you, Mrs Hedges. Councillor Arnold, are you prepared, or your group prepared, to accept the recommendations as is?
Chairman, I've refreshed my memory of the recommendations, and I see no reason why we shouldn't accept them as they are. We've asked to comment. I have commented these days. We have a record of that comment. Not that I'm going to indulge myself by going back and listening to what I said. And I say that the time for me to raise this again will be at the budget speech in February, when we've seen what comes out in November. Could I just make absolutely clear, so there's no doubt about it, Mrs Hedges or Anne Wayne, as she was then, and I worked much more closely together in years not so long ago, and I've absolutely no doubt that she's not in the business of making political statements as a senior officer of this council. No, I see no difficulty why what is recommended, those 4 recommendations set out, we shouldn't go through.
Thank you very much for those comments. Okay, I think we need to move to the vote. Do we have a proposer? Councillor Higgins. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Locker. All in favour? Passed unanimously. And I think that concludes the meeting for this evening. The date of the next meeting is on the work programme and will be on the 13th of October. Dates of the pre-briefs will be circulated in due course. I think they have to be agreed. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Good evening.